I call this the hedgehog path. It's the idea that life doesn't usually change in big dramatic leaps, but in small steps that only really make sense when you look back at them. And I didn't expect the house viewing to be one of those steps. So I went to see a house, obviously. It was part of a program I was doing called Creating the Impossible with Michael Neal. If you've never heard of that before, check it out because it was absolutely amazing. So we were asked to come up with a project, something which would make us gasp, giggle, or grin, but ultimately which felt impossible. And I said I wanted to buy a house. It's somewhere of my own and where I felt I belonged. So they encouraged me to go and view houses, of course. Anyway, I remember I wasn't overly emotional about it. I was hopeful, but I didn't really believe I could buy it, and it was well out of my price range. But it really did feel good to start imagining what it might feel like to live somewhere else. So, you know that feeling when you start thinking, well, this could be a fresh start, even if you don't really say it out loud. That was where I was kind of at. So, even before I got there, I was already doing a bit of mental imagining what it would be like to have a bit more space, what it would be like to feel a bit more settled, what it would be like to sort of walk into my own little house and a garden. So, I went to the viewing. Actually, I nearly didn't go to the viewing. I turned up on the first week and the agent wasn't there. She just didn't turn up. I knocked on the door and somebody who was living there answered and said she had cancelled and she hadn't told me. But anyway, I'd made up my mind I wasn't going to contact her and I wasn't going to go. But she actually contacted me the next day and rearranged. So I thought, well, what have I got to lose? So when I got there, the front room was amazing and the light coming through the window, it was just so nice. It was just a really lovely open living space. The kitchen felt a little bit small, but it was actually bigger than the current house where I live in. The garden was fantastic and it stretched further than I could imagine. A large shed at the end. And there was actually a little bit of extra garden that could be added onto the house as well that the agent showed me afterwards. I did have this moment of thinking, actually, this is quite nice. How could I afford it? But then I also noticed I wasn't fully settling into it. It was more like I was just observing it rather than feeling at home in it. And then I went upstairs and something just didn't seem quite right. The bedrooms just didn't feel right. Felt smaller than I needed them to be. I just couldn't see myself living there. And remember walking through thinking, well, this isn't it. And that should have been it really. But what surprised me was what happened next. So when I got home, I didn't feel disappointed the way I expected to. And quite quickly, I realized that what I was really after was this feeling of belonging, somewhere to call home. Somewhere that I felt that I loved, something that made me feel safe. And I realized it wasn't really about finding a house. It was that sense of feeling settled, not just physically, but emotionally. And I think that changed the tone of everything. So, because instead of continuing to focus on maybe this house, maybe that house, and searching through Rightmove, I started looking at where I already lived, um, and what I could do differently. So I started focusing more on my rented house. I started sort of caring more about it really, and looking at it as if it's my own. Which, if I'm honest, I'd been mentally treating it as temporary for a long time, just somewhere in between, not somewhere I really was feeling emotionally invested in. So that's when I started seeing it differently and feeling differently about the house. I did something quite simple. I thanked it. Um, I cleaned it. I decluttered it. I sorted out the yard. And now I love to sit in the yard. Last summer I hardly sat there at all. This summer I love it. I love sitting there, enjoying the sunshine, watching the bees, looking at the flowers. And even in the evening, I've enjoyed going out there and just sitting out there and enjoying the cool in the evening and enjoying just looking around and just being out there. So that made a big difference. And the whole thing, it wasn't some big transformation montage or anything like that. It was just ordinary life. But what I noticed I was doing with a slightly different way was I had different energy about it. It was less, I can't wait to leave here, and more, let me make this feel nicer while I'm here. And that distinction did matter more than I expected. Because when you change the feeling behind what you're doing, Even small things start to feel different. And then something else happened alongside that. Little things that had been sitting on the back burner for ages just started to shift. So the wallpaper that had been bothering me for a really long time finally got sorted. I'd been asking about it for a year, but they finally sent someone to repaper the bare patch. The broken door that I'd been asking to be repaired for a long time also got fixed. And these things were just on the list for a while. I had told them about them. They just hadn't been done. But they just quietly started getting resolved without me doing anything differently. Nothing dramatic, just noticeable enough that I started to pay attention to it. And I remember thinking, well, this is interesting. Things are just moving a little bit more easily, not in a magical way, just in a slightly less stuck way. And my feeling about the house changed, and I thought I needed to change too. And so I'd still want my own home one day, and that hasn't gone away. I would still love to have my own place that I own and I can do what I want with. I still want the space, I still want the freedom, and I still want the ability to do things in my own way. But it has stopped feeling like an urgent, this is the only thing I can do to fix everything kind of desire. And it's softened a lot. It has started to become a part of the future rather than a pressure in the present day. What surprised me the most and is how I started to feel a bit more at home where I already lived. Not because anything major has changed, but because I've changed how I relate to the house. So that's led me somewhere else as well. I've realised I want to get my finances in order, not from a panic and not from pressure, but from clarity. Like I can see more clearly the choices that I want to have in the future. And sorting out my money now will give me those choices. I want to see things stabilize. I want to feel more stable. It's that feeling of stability, safety, the sort of the ability to choose what you want to do. Um, and it's helped me to feel more grounded, less scattered, and it's felt like a really calm decision rather than a stressful one. So going back to the hedgehog path, this is the idea that life doesn't change all at once and it shifts in small moments that you don't always recognize at the time. And I just felt that this story sort of really illustrated that for me. So the viewing that wasn't quite right, the feeling of belonging that suddenly showed up, and the decision to start taking care of what I already had instead of what was focusing on what's next. Small steps, little changes, different attention. And I think it's one of those moments for me, not because everything's changed, but because something in how I was seeing things has changed. And that has changed everything for me. So thank you for listening. And I'll see you next time as we continue to explore the hedgehog path together.